They seem to be completely unaware that Christians are being murdered, that in the Kurdish territory, up in the upper part of Iraq, Christians are routinely beheaded. Hundreds of Christian children had their heads cut off because they refused to renounce Christ. This is the kind of treatment that Christians are getting at the hands of Islamic jihadists.
Alongside Miranda Khan, J.D. Hayworth welcoming you into our second hour of America's Forum, and we make note there of Mike Huckabee on Fox News talking about the persecution of Christians by ISIS in the Middle East. Now, a different kind of persecution, a softer form of Christian persecution, finding its way now onto American soil as government is cracking down on churches in one Florida city.
That's how some are describing it. The houses of worship are being ordered to get business licenses in order to continue operating. And the targeting in Lake Worth, Florida even goes a step further. Officials were so concerned, they actually sent a code enforcement officer in undercover to spy on a Baptist church meeting in a coffee shop.
Joining us now, Mathew Staver, founder and chairman of the Liberty Council. As an attorney, he's representing Common Ground Church, the congregation that was targeted, and their pastor, Mike Olive, also joins us. Pastor Mike, take us back. When did these problems with Lake Worth city government start for you guys?
Well, you know, it's really amazing. We never even knew for about 2 weeks that there was even a problem. One of our worship leaders, a couple of our worship team, they saw an undercover guy come in filming with a camera and different things like that. And then 2 weeks later, we had a visit from one of the code enforcement officers telling us that this Sunday was our last Sunday.
Why do you think you were being targeted?
Well, you know, I mean, there's always a conflict with the kingdom of God and the kingdom of darkness, and there is one of our councilmen downtown that I had gone to and spoke to and stuff like that about, he was saying things that we were an anti-gay church and different things like that, and one of the things that we've positioned ourselves as a church and a very strong gay community is to love God, love people, and to pursue, you know, those that are lost and outside the kingdom of God. And I went down to his shop. He has a shop down there. In the back of it, he has a lot of adult novelties. And I went down there to talk to him just to see if we could discuss the issue, find common ground somehow. And he looked at me and said, you know, you better not have a church down there. And it seems like that right after that is when, it wasn't long after that we had the undercover city employee come in and videotape our services.
Well, Pastor Mike, with 2.5 minutes remaining in the segment, let's bring in your attorney, Mathew, who's Skyping in from Orlando this morning. This whole notion of the city sending a code enforcement officer undercover to a meeting at a coffee shop, legally with First Amendment rights, what's your legal take on what's happening here?
Well, it's certainly unconstitutional. I think Pastor Olive is right. It began with Commissioner Andy Amoroso, who is a homosexual activist. And in fact, he prides himself in having a so-called pride store there, or pride business, and had an opposition, obviously, to this church and said, you better not have a church in my district. And then we had these code enforcement officers come out. Clearly, these KGB-style tactics are unconstitutional under the First Amendment, but they also are not permissible under the city's own code, because the city's own code specifically exempts churches from obtaining a business license. Interestingly, they're also targeting the First Presbyterian Church that's been there nearly a century. They actually sent them a letter saying, it looks like you don't have a business license, you need to immediately get one. Well, in this case, with regards to the pastor in the Common Grounds Church, they said you need to cease operations by March the 2nd. If you don't, you'll be fined $500 a day. And then they went after the landlord, trying to get the landlord to evict or cause the church service to stop. Otherwise, they were going to fine the landlord. So Liberty Council has come in. We're standing right beside Pastor Olive and the church. We're not going to allow this city to bully this church or any other church into non-existence or to silence. What they're doing is clearly unconstitutional, and what they're doing is clearly not authorized under their own code enforcement provisions.
I want to ask you really quickly, and we only have like a few seconds, but I know different states have different rules about what you can record with the knowledge of the people being there. How does Florida?
Florida is a two-party consent. You can't just simply come in and record and use that without the second party's consent. So what they did when they recorded this without the second party's consent was illegal under Florida law.
Okay.
They said that they were going to use this for future court proceedings. Frankly, they would be in court if they used this because it's impermissible, it's illegal in Florida to do so.
Well, we will continue in the courtroom of public opinion. Pastor Olive and Matt Staver, stay with us. You come back as well as America's Forum continues from Newsmax TV. You're seeing some scenes here from the website findcommongroundchurch.com. That is the website for the Common Ground Church of Lake Worth, Florida, and this church has encountered some difficulties with the city of Lake Worth. That's why we're continuing our conversation with Pastor Mike Olive of that church and Mathew Staver, the founder and chairman of the Liberty Council, providing legal counsel to the church. Pastor Mike, let me get back to you on this. I know that pastors often meet away from their different congregations. We heard that First Presbyterian Church in Lake Worth has likewise had some problems with the city. Any other congregations, to your knowledge, being targeted there in the city of Lake Worth?
Well, one of the things that we did, we had a prayer not protest prayer meeting at City Hall, and while we were there, several other churches joined us, and almost collectively with all of them, they had all commented to me that they had been having problems with code enforcement, specifically the code enforcement in Lake Worth, in the city of Lake Worth.
Do you think that's because this was going on inside a coffee shop? Do you think you would have been having the same problems if you were actually in what appeared to look like a church?
Well, you know, that's a great question, because one of the things that we have in our downtown district is we have a lot of different restaurants, a lot of different venue options where there are all kinds of meetings. Almost all of the restaurants downtown have different kinds of meetings going on, whether that's Kiwanis, whether that's neighborhood associations, real estate, realtors meetings, different things like that, business meetings. Almost all of them do it. So we were really surprised that that they even made this an issue. The coffee bar is open 84 hours a week. And for 6 hours a week, we have our services there.
Well, mindful of this, let me turn to Matt Staver as an attorney. You know, it appears that those who oppose spiritual expression in the marketplace are saying, well, it's okay if it goes on technically on church grounds, but we don't want to see it out there anywhere else. Is that what's behind what's going on in Lake Worth, that kind of philosophy, Mathew?
I think it's broader because it didn't just target this particular coffee bar, Common Grounds Coffee Bar, and the Common Grounds Church. It went beyond that to targeting churches. As Pastor Olive said, there's other churches that are now starting to get pushback and controversy because of the application of these zoning code enforcement provisions, or the officers, I should say, that have nothing to do with their operation. I think they're just intimidating churches. And again, you've got this First Presbyterian Church, and it's literally been in this city for nearly 100 years. Obviously, it's an identifiable church. It's been there for a century, and they're giving that church the same problem. But if you go back over to the Common Grounds Church, if you had Monday Night Football and you had people sitting around the area and drinking coffee and enjoying the Monday Night Football game, and somebody gets up and speaks about their favorite team, they wouldn't come after that particular gathering. But now if you have these individuals coming together once a week or a couple of times a week, and then they're speaking about Christ and the power of Jesus Christ, then they are trying to intimidate them. So they're specifically targeting churches. They're specifically targeting the content of the message. I think there's an animosity. I think it originates with the people on the city commission. I think Amoroso, the council member, is clearly behind this. There may be others. There's obviously people within the zoning code enforcement that are complicit with this. One of the things is very clear. They have an animosity to churches to the message of Christ, and they're trying to intimidate pastors and churches into silence. You cannot have a requirement that churches have a business license. They're exempt from that. What they want to do is regulate these churches. They want to tax the churches, and frankly, I think they want to silence the churches, but we're not about to allow that to happen.
Matthew, I'm going to ask you the same question that we asked Mike earlier. Okay, again, why now? Why these specific churches? Is it because of the message that these churches are relaying about homosexuality?
I think it's certainly about that. I mean, this particular church preaches the love of Jesus Christ. It's not out there to bash any particular person. It's not out to bash homosexuals. It's out to give the transforming message of Jesus Christ to the community. But for some, that transformative message is impermissible. You know, if you preach any part of the Bible regarding human sexuality and you don't affirm their lifestyle, that's not only impermissible to them, but they want to silence you. And obviously in Florida, we've had the issue of the constitutional marriage amendment that was passed overwhelmingly in 2008, and a court down in South Florida said that it's unconstitutional. That's still going through litigation. I think some individuals have become emboldened, and we see that not just in Florida, but around the country, where they are targeting particular messages of faith, Christian ministries and churches, people of faith, to try to silence them on this particular issue.
And the only thing that constricts us about matters of eternity is this temporal plane. We're out of time. Gentlemen, we thank you so much for some of yours. We're coming right back.